Okay, how's it going, everybody? So we're going to read some more Soong, Ling. This is Confucianism in Modern China. So let's see, this came out in 1975. Let's go ahead and get into it. Okay. Many discussions are now going on in China regarding the practicability of applying Confucian teachings to modern life. In the past 20 years, many scholars, politicians, and persons in power have been trying to revive Confucian teachings to make people believe that in these years of disorders, calamities, and foreign invasions, Confucianism would be able to consolidate, strengthen, and unify the Chinese nation, as it had done many times in early Chinese history. But there are other scholars and educationalists who are equally convinced that Confucianism must be banished from every schoolbook in modern China in 1937 is to survive. There began 3 years ago a movement entitled, quote, The New Life, which is politically reactionary and flavored with Confucianism. This makes it of great practical importance to find the right approach to Confucianism. In the 5th century BC, when Confucius was living, there were great disorders everywhere in ancient China. States ruled by slave-owning aristocrats constantly contended with one another, fighting for supremacy. Many slave-owning groups succumbed in war. The fate of other such states continuously hung in the balance. Not only was there warfare between these aristocrats, but there were also uprisings of the slaves, together with the suppression of these uprisings by the lords. Thus, we see that in this era, 5th century BC, the class struggle existed. At that time came Confucius, a Chinese philosopher representing the slave-owning class, whose influence upon Chinese life and thought are felt even today. Confucius preached moral codes that upheld slave society, and attempting to strengthen slave owners' rule. He based his teachings on historical traditions. The stories about the semi-mythical model kings, Yao and Shun, were perhaps manufactured by Confucius himself or his disciples. No one can prove whether Yao and Shun really lived, but based on the myths about them, Confucius and his disciples evolved conceptions of the rule of the slave-owning aristocrats. People cannot govern themselves, they declared. People must be governed by wise and judicious officials. They preached that obedience must be the general principle of every human society. Wives must submit to husbands, children to parents, and every man to his ruler and king. Later, the feudal ruling class and its scholars took over Confucius' teachings to make people submissive and maintain a whole structure of ceremonies to consolidate the position of the feudal order. They set forth vindications for patriarchal authority. Sovereignty in the Confucian state is built upon the authority of the father in the home. The patriarchal family is the cell, the substructure of feudalism. Confucian teachings are autocratic from beginning to end. Society was divided into two classes: the ruling class, first the slave owners, later the landlords, and the subjugated class, first the slaves. Later the peasantry, and between these were the scholar officials. In the Book of Rights, we find such characteristics saying, quote, courtesy is not extended to commoners, and punishment is not applied to lords, end quote. There were many speculations around Confucianism during more than 2 millennia, as well as different interpretations of his teachings. There were periods in Chinese history when Confucianism was banned and his books burnt. But notwithstanding, Confucianism survived and dominated Chinese thought. And there is little wonder. Confucianism is the philosophy serving the system of exploitation of man by man. And so long as this system existed, it needed Confucian teachings. But Confucius' ethical system was nothing but mere rituals and ceremonials, while his precepts enslaved the intellects of the scholars, limited the scope of learning, and kept the masses of the people in ignorance. Confucius was conservative. He based his teachings, as we have seen, solely on tradition. It is natural that Confucian conservatism has hindered the development of science and of society in China. Confucius was for turning back history. He was against all revolution. His teachings are hostile to every change of social order. It is strange indeed that in our modern times there are still Chinese intellectuals zealously advocating for the revival of Confucianism. Efforts to turn back the clock of history are not only fruitless and futile, but they obstruct human progress and advancement. Instead of reviving anachronistic Confucianism, it is of utmost importance for us to eradicate all remnants of feudalism in rural economy as well as in urban life. We must cleanse the Chinese mentality and free it from the cobwebs of Confucian ideology, which block our cultural development. Revival of Confucianism is pure reaction disguised as concern for social order. The structure of our present society is radically changing, transforming and remodeling. Naturally, the new social order demands new ideology, new moral codes, and new relationships. There is confusion in many minds, and it is difficult to solve the problems that arise from the great changes that are taking place in China. Confucianism cannot help to solve them. It has lost every practical value. Only the reactionary-minded seek its restoration. But Confucian ideology has permeated the brain of Chinese intellectuals during a longer period than any other philosophical system. We must realize how deeply Confucian influences have been embedded in our art, literature, social sciences, and morals. We must exert great efforts to uproot Confucian ideas out of every nook and corner of our life and thoughts. Okay. So it says here a note from China Reconstructs. Not sure what that is. It's apparently on Marxist.org though. So it says, in 1934, in coordination with this counter-revolutionary war of encirclement and suppression against the workers and peasants, Red Army led by the Chinese Communist Party and the people of the revolutionary bases, Chiang Kai-shek, launched the fascist, quote, New Life movement, end quote, in politics and ideology. It sought to impose the old Confucian cant about propriety, righteousness, honesty, and sense of shame. And, quote, reference for Confucius and study of his classics, end quote, in order to counteract Marxism with these bankrupt shibboleths and prevent China's youth from taking the path of progress and revolution. Its vain purpose was to preserve the old order and defeat the Communist Party and the people. Okay. So yeah, this is Confucianism in Modern China by Soong Ling. This is, it was released in 1975. Yeah, 1975. So, well, thank y'all for tuning in. Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Medium, and then YouTube. Marxist Saw. On YouTube, hit subscribe and the notification bell. Please do. And check out all the readings I got on there. I know I probably past 230 readings now on YouTube, on my YouTube page. Trying to get it to 300 soon. There's so much reading to do there. I've read so much on here so far. There's only more reading to come. So yeah, please check it out and hit me up on there. Also hit me up. Feel free to hit me up. Y'all have a great day. And Dodada Goy.